Failed a few, it was great. What do I need? She's like, you need like 40 credits. I'm like, fuck you! What I want to do. Anyway, everything I learned about this industry, I learned on my own. I run my own company. We do research and engineering stuff out of, I'll say outside of Baltimore, because nobody knows suburban DC worth a shit unless you live there. But, you know, when we do good work, I like to think we make a difference, but we're making enough as we go along, right? And that's all I ever do. I have no cert, zero, none. I've attended one formal training class in my entire life. I've written books. Do I know what it takes to write a book? Write a really good marketing proposal, right? My first book I wrote for O'Reilly, I thought to myself, well, shit, I've been doing security stuff for a while, I'll write a book. Go to O'Reilly's website, so you want to write a book? I'm like, that's me. Click the button, read through the description, I've done it, fill out this Word doc. The Word doc is mostly a marketing document. One of the books are out there. Who's going to buy it? Who's going to publish something else while we're doing this? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, by the way, give us an outline of what the book's going to look like and who you are. It's like a page. So, 10-page document, like a page about the book itself. The rest of it's marketing diagram. 2 weeks later, FedEx shows up, says, here's your contract, write a book. I said, cool, I should learn something about this topic. Able to live in security, I don't think I owned a wireless card. This is back in the day when I buy an actual card. And I went out and learned about it and published. But when you go to Barnes & Noble or Amazon or whatever to buy a book, that's the barrier to entry for most publishing. Could you write a marketing document? Huzzah! Look at our industry. I don't write code. They take away my compiler when I get a new laptop, because I suck so bad at it. So I would challenge you to not trust anything you hear in the next 2.5 days, right? There's 150 odd speakers up on stage saying all kinds of random shit. We're all just making it up. If you disagree, say so, either in the talk or after the fact, or at the bar later, buy a beer, get them drunk, and then hear what reality really is, right? It's a complex industry, and one of the things I'm going to try to hone in on today is ways to become more educated, given how complex an industry this is, particularly through gaming. Okay, I'm a gamer. I used to be. I've been busy enough lately. I haven't been gaming too much, but I fancy myself a gamer. Again, no formal education in gaming. Anyone actually get like a bachelor's or master's in gaming? Such things exist. Not playing, like developing, sorry. Does real world experience count? Because I've got like 5,000 WoW hours, and I should at least give you 30 credits. That'd be awesome. So we all know and love this movie. Let's see. I don't have actual plan for this. Oh, it goes to the next slide. All right. Then I missed the play button because. There's a lesson here. That's one. So, there's two things to take away. One, games. Two, as a child, I thought Matthew Broderick was a good actor. And I'm like, oh, he sucked. And he was really good at Ferris Bueller. You know why? Because he could talk to the camera and not actually have to act. You know, he has this cutout of like, let me tell you about my friend over here in his Ferrari. It's like, oh, you're not really acting, you're just shooting the shit with the camera. That's totally different. In a movie where he had to act, he really sucked at it. However, there are lessons to be learned. I'll get there in a minute. So, what's the deal with InfoSec and this field that we're in? So, if you haven't noticed, it changes a lot, right? Like, also, I made an eye chart. If any of you in the back can't see, my nephew is an eye doctor, and I'd be happy to fit your glasses. I'm making it. It's a talk. If someone wants to fact check me whether or not my nephew's an eye doctor, I'll hire you. What's interesting about it is security, not only does it change, but it's incredibly complex, right? I mean, it's the weird interaction of all these systems and things. And as professionals, we barely understand it. To the layperson, it's fucking magic, right? People are like, oh, you do security. Okay, so I was at Penn State last week interviewing students for jobs. Anyone go to Penn State? Did you graduate from Penn State? Yeah, okay, yeah, see, that's what real school's like. And this guy's like, he comes up to us looking for a job, doing security work. I'm like, oh, tell me what you've done. He's like, well, in class, we cracked how alphabetic Caesar ciphers and things like that. Like, oh, that's wonderful. We did some forensic stuff. Oh, what tools? I don't remember their names. Oh, this is going real well for you, fella. And then, like, do you do anything else? Well, yeah, for a while, my buddy was like, I'd leave my laptop around and he kept breaking into my system and changing a bunch of stuff. So I installed this man in the middle thing and changed all the certs. And so I man in the middle, took all his credentials for all these different websites and then put a bunch of shit on his Facebook page or whatever. I'm like, well, okay, first of all, like, slightly illegal, but good on you, man. Like, way to figure it out. He's like, well, the biggest problem is now my roommates are super scared because they think I can do anything. I'm like, right, because that's the magic of security. Like what's he have straight down? Like, you broke through the crypto. You're just like that guy in that movie, Where's the Gibson?
Unbelievable.
Come on. Yeah, it's going to get worse from here. But even in this industry, like, we have problems with, how do you mitigate phishing attacks? How do they really work? Well, I download stuff and I do something and I pop people. Well, that's cool. What's actually happening? What's happening in the hood of Metasploit? Oh, I got a lot of people like to press the big red button, and a lot of people don't know what's actually happening under the hood. Crypto is, again, magic. We have people that fancy themselves closet cryptographers, and they should stay in the closet because crypto is hard. It's really hard. It's discrete math. How many people pass discrete math? That's really going to be smart. You look at the big brains. A lot of people don't know what discrete math is. They'll go ahead and try discrete math. 2 plus 2 is pretty discrete. I can put a box around it, I don't really know. Lay people, there's really 2 types of security learning I want to talk about today. One, it's teaching lay people about security, right? Like, how do we make people that aren't in our industry smarter? And then 2, how do we take people in the industry and help them understand really complex topics, right? That's the second problem. So I want to talk about education from both fronts. The first, I'm going to talk about lay people. A story. How many people have jobs? As I'm riding cross country, we get to Western Virginia. Not West Virginia, lowercase Western Virginia. A little part of Virginia right before it gets into Kentucky. And we go to a bluegrass festival. And the opening act of the Bluegrass Festival is a bluegrass comedy troupe. Okay? That's interesting. Like Hee Haw. For those of you that remember Hee Haw. And I said, we are all 35 or older, if you raise your hand. I'm a picking, I'm a grinning. I had a big Hee Haw reference. Anyway, so, they're telling these jokes and they're totally falling flat, which is kind of weird because you think they're in their home audience, it should work out. And then at some point it's like, I got a song about a job. How many of you people have jobs? A bunch of people raise their hands. The rest of you must have voted for Obama, and the whole place bust out laughing. I'm like, oh, that's where I am. I've left metropolitan areas. Excellent. So in your job, you might get an email like this sometime in September, right? This is like the first or second week of September, Security Awareness Month. October, this is how much it matters to me, right? I guess it's around the corner. So is it the whole month now? The whole month is Security Awareness. Excellent. Oh, that makes it so much more engaging. So you get an email that says, blah, 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 blah. I like notes. It's something about security. You read it about long enough to go, oh, it's the security month. Day 2. Oh, I like sheep too. This is really going down. Really give a shit. Day 3, you see the security email. It's gone. Delete. Day 4, delete. Day 5, you're like, I wonder if I can send a mail filter. Hey, look, you can actually maybe educate your users on mail filtering by sending them security emails. So, HackerHuntress isn't in here, is she? Probably not. So this was her InfoSec reactions to user security training. You got the training done, but you hit a bunch of people in the head in the process. It's really a painful thing to have to do on both sides, right? You have a bunch of emails, it's a whole thing you have to sign and print out. You print something out. I have read your security stuff. Excellent, jackass. And the security guys don't like setting it up either. So various people, Dave Vitale being one of them, wrote an article last last year, which got a lot of press, basically said, don't train people, they're idiots, you can't possibly win this war, people are going to click stupid shit, there's nothing you can do about it. Dan Guido, I don't know, the guy with like the badger icon on Twitter, he keynoted at DerbyCon yesterday or this morning or something, and he basically said, user training is a placebo, it doesn't make any difference, you can do it if you want, it makes you feel better, it gives you warm and fuzzy, but it doesn't accomplish shit. Okay, let's explore that for a moment. Just for fun. I'm pretty pessimistic. We have armed all our users with double-barreled shotguns and point them right at their feet and say, don't pull the trigger. Don't click that link. You know? But what they do, they're going to click the link. Let's pretend you're a 1,000-person company. It takes them an hour to read all the stupid training emails that you sent out. That's 1,000 hours. Let's say the average cost per hour for people in your organization is $75. $75 times 1,000, $75,000. Plus, however long it takes you to write the stupid emails. I can give 40 hours because you're a slow typist and you had to Google some shit. So I ended up with about $80,000 to do your security awareness email campaign that people deleted. All right, how do I get the $80,000 back? Did I make $80,000 difference in the organization? Let's say a low-level incident cost me 8 hours of lost productivity, whoever's laptop got popped, and 4 hours of IT time to restore and do all the other stuff. So that's my degree of difficulty just went down. If I stick a landing or not, I can't land down. A few gymnastic geeks in the room, but not many. So anyway, it's like $8,000, $7,000 something per incident. And that's assuming low level, you know, this isn't like people roaming around inside your enterprise. So you'd have to stop 90 incidents a year happening to get that $80,000 back. That's rough mathematics. That's a lot of incidents to stop. I don't know that many, there's 3 types of incidents in the world, right? The ones that happen, but your antivirus, whatever the frick magic technology stopped it. There's the, hey, they got in and nobody knows. And then there's the, oh, they got in and we found that incident. Right? Those are the expensive ones. Those are the ones you know about. So the really bad ones, they escalate, right? They cost many hundreds of thousands of dollars. Is your user awareness training going to stop the really expensive incidents that you found out about? Why? Because if the adversary doesn't get in after the first try, because the first person didn't click the link, what are they going to do? Send a second email. Oh, they're successful. Magic. So that $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 you spent to remediate that big intrusion that you had, you're going to spend it regardless of the educated users or not. That sucks. Is user awareness training good? Is it important? I'm going to argue, and I hate myself for it, yes. Okay? It's part of a broader risk management program, right? You can't have your users overtly doing stupid stuff and not realize it, right? If they're going to do something dumb, they should at least go click, oh, shit! It's that half second in between, when they click the button and their brain's like, no, stop, and all too late, it's out. So, I think we have to go through the process. Well, how do you get as much value out of that as possible? Also, as a side note, David, I will tell you that podiums should never anymore be designed with a slant to them because people have laptops and not pieces of paper. I'm not Abe Lincoln, I'm not worried about it. My laptop's almost fallen like half a dozen times already, so you may wish to warn any future speakers that either put your laptop on the ground or pretend that you're Lincoln, I don't know. So, pretend that you're Lincoln, that's the vampire slaying one, that's the good one. What does technical security training look like? How many people have been to technical security training? Hopefully more than a few, right? Yeah, I don't know, maybe not. People are like, I'm sick of raising my damn hand, this is a lot of freaking work. We're geeks, this is a lot of work. This is not. This is what security training looks like, right? I give you knowledge! Gotta do the demo. Okay. And then they're like, one guy's like, dude, I wrote a book on this, I'm just here because my boss made me come. And like 8 people are like, what's bash? Okay. What's LS mean? How come DER doesn't work? So, you go through this process, and eventually you kind of check out. Maybe you learn some stuff. You spent 7 days or 5 days in Orlando, or who the frick knows. Orlando, not the happiest place on earth, by the way. It's actually one of the most dangerous places, I think only behind like Chicago and Detroit as far as violent crime is concerned. Anyone from Orlando? I'm asking this seriously. because I'm going to slag on Orlando really hard in like half a second. I went to Orlando for a conference a few years ago, and you know, it's a security conference, whatever. Half a mile down the road, are you drinking vodka out of a giant bottle, sir?
Yeah, water.
Oh, damn. This is pretty good on stage. Let me just finish this off. Anyway, there's a Bank of America like half a mile away from where the hotel was. 4 o'clock in the morning, there's a shooting in the parking lot. Dude dies. Police come in, they investigate, clean everything up. 1 o'clock in the morning, the bank opens up for business. You know what happened at noon? The bank got robbed. Same bank, different group of people, just coincidentally decided to roll that bank where some people were just shot in the parking lot. That's the Disney World. Like, woo! He's dodging gunshots, he's giving hugs to kids. That sort of land. How did I get to that? Advanced Googling. That's I was going around looking at different course outlines and things like that, and this one just struck me that advanced Googling is a thing. Anyway, not to pick on it, but this was a SANS course outline, I think, maybe something like that. But it's, you know, here's knowledge. This is a five-day training course. Look at the tabs. We're going from the need from security analysis to snort, advanced exploit and tools on day 5. If I'm making the case on advanced Googling on day 1, and you don't know how to use, like, I don't know, entitle, you're not going to understand what's happening with advanced exploits. Let me show you a knot sled. Oh, is its name Rosebud? No. Yeah, that's a long path to get to such a case. How did we learn it? He doesn't talk about gaming once. Perfect. That's the way I like my talks. It's all illusion. Dale's Common Experience. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this if you've gone to an education or a psych class or something like that. This thing's been around since the 60s. I should be better at citing this. I don't know. This is like a distillation from Dale's paper, okay? So this general idea of the more engaged you are, the more you learn. It should not be surprising. When Dale published this work in I think it must have been 63, this was a theory. And since then, a lot of psych and education type folks have gone to try to prove this or disprove it. You know, they run tests and see what happens. And for the most part, it's held true. Now, there's a few interesting things. You look at it, participate in hands-on workshops, technical training. Here's knowledge, do the demo, right? And for all intents and purposes, you learn 70% of the material doing that, which ain't bad. I guess the question is, though, in our industry, is that enough? When attackers live in the seams, when they live in the seams of our code, of our operations, and our architecture, is knowing something to 70% good enough? Right? I don't know. I'm gonna posit no. I would like people to understand the material more deeply than 70% of whatever the hell I'm trying to report on that or whoever. So, what affects how we learn beyond Dale's Cone? So Dale's Cone is influenced by a number of factors. The environment, you know, trying to learn when it's loud and hot and you're in some horrific place. Or conversely, when you're in boondoggle and you're out on the beach, go to training in the Caribbean sometime. Go to the beach in the Caribbean sometime. You don't actually go to the training. The age of the subjects matters, you know, as it turns out, no offense, old people learn slower than young people. Brains are a little less valuable as you get older. The course material can make a big difference. How recall is tested, that gets into the specifics of the actual, you know, how do we validate what you've learned, how do we measure that 70% or 50% or whatever. And finally, what's motivating the student? I think when you look at these different things, you know, that can affect learning and move that bar around on that 70%, if you will, those 4 first things can be maximized independently, right? Like, you can control the environment. Right? We can make it bright, we can give you lots of coffee, we can make sure that it's not in the Caribbean, whatever. Age of the subjects is fixed. Like, you know, people go to training and go, I'm going to be younger today. You can act younger, sir, but that does not make you. That's what I have a challenge with that, clearly on a regular basis. The course material we call the real thing here is the motivation. How do you maximize motivation when teaching? How do you get students really engaged? And that's really where gaming comes into play. So first of all, there's a study in 2005, Lever and some other folks released a study that were looking at kind of some of the downstream effects of Dale's cone. And what they really wanted to understand from a motivation perspective was intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. So intrinsic, you can kind of think about it as, I work on problems because I want to learn how to solve them, versus extrinsic, which is, I'm supposed to do this, right? It's my job, someone told me to, there's a gun in my head, whatever it is, I'm being motivated by an external force, vice being motivated by myself. Okay, does that kind of make sense? What they found was kind of interesting. When you look at these two issues discretely, as you increase intrinsic motivation, as people are more engaged, they learn more and they perform better, right? So this particular study looked at GPA and California standardized test scores. And in general, people continue to do better the more motivated they were. There's positive correlation. There's negative correlation with external or extrinsic motivation. So when people were, the more that they were motivated, it would start to negatively impact their scores, with stressing them out or whatever. However, that's when you look at it discretely. When you look at it together, I'm just going to put this up this eye chart. You don't actually have to read it if you don't want to. But what turned out to be best was a combination of extrinsic and intrinsic motivators, right? Which, okay, shouldn't be surprising, but it's useful to have the data behind it to understand to what extent. Intrinsic motivation, the more people want to be engaged, the more that they're going to learn, period. They'll amp themselves up, they'll stop freaking eating, man. It'll be like a goddamn learning convention that looks like a gaming center in South Korea where people are dying because they're learning so much as they forgot to eat, But the more you hit them with the stick and say, learn, 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 the less they're going to learn, and frankly, they may actually, their achievement may go down. So you need to balance it by combining enough extrinsic motivation to kind of keep them going through the walls, and then maximize the shit out of the intrinsic motivation until they're completely engaged in doing everything they're supposed to do. So what? It turns out that to do training, to get people to learn, you need the carrot and the stick. And I'm going to posit that the carrot in this case is a game, right? Psychologically, get people bought into the training exercise, and they're going to learn more than if you just say, here's today's training, here's my knowledge. So I won't bore you with that. There, so shall we come on? Look at him! I want to do Ferris Bueller. Sorry. There was actually, last year at the Penn State recruiting thing, I've never been to big school recruiting events before, and the goal appears to be to scare the shit out of the students. I guess because that's what real world is like. You go to your job, like, oh God, I'm going to kill you. So they make them all sit in this hallway behind like the basketball court, and they sit there quietly with big signs like "shut the fuck up," and they just sit there, and then they call their name. Like as a recruiter, you come up like, "I'm looking for Miss Smith," and you're like, "Miss Smith." Girl get up and shake and toward you, and the next guy is like, Mr. Talbot, and Mr. Talbot will get up and pee in his pants and like, really nervous. One of the recruiters said, "I'm looking for Mr. Bueller." Bueller. Bueller. The kids were all like, person working the microphone looked at the recruiter like, "You're a dick." So, games are the ultimate intrinsic motivator, as it turns out. So, there's been a lot of game research and game theory and that kind of thing. Game theory research these days kind of leans toward like economic theory, but there was game theory more based on learning and what games were like kind of back in the 70s and 80s. And there's been a resurgence recently because video games get a lot of money and people want to find out how to make more money, so they make better games that are more like crack. And so in 75, Cheek Sets Me High, I swear to God I pronounced that. I already had all the little umlauts and stuff that were in that name, like I did not have an extended Unicode character set to be able to type that out appropriately. Published this word called Beyond Boredom and Anxiety. Like, that's how you hook people, right? Titled Beyond Boredom, like, super bored, overboard. See where we can take it. It's so anxious, you have to eat yourself. It's like a college recruiting interview. Hook all this together, you'll see where it's going. So he explored this idea of what he called flow, which is, quote, satisfying, exhilarating feeling of creative accomplishment and heightened function. So in his mind, games were the ultimate manifestation of something that would give you flow, right? Because there's not a lot of consequence to it. It was just like you could accomplish things. Things would just, man, it got people really amped up, and they continued to build upon previous accomplishments, things of that nature. Jane McGonigal, who wrote this book called Reality is Broken, and her book is really focused on how to turn video games into an act of good for the world, which is an interesting concept, solving complex problems that will help humanity and making reality better through gaming. So it's like, my reality's okay, I don't know, maybe yours sucked, that's why you wrote the book. But she talks about this idea of fear, and it's not just a car. Fear is this immense sense of emotional pride, right? And it's actually an Italian word that doesn't have a strong translation in English. Like, we have a very hard time describing fear as a concept in English words. But the original people who coined the term kind of talk about it like that sense of coming out of the cave and killing an animal. It's this very primal, I won this thing. It gets you all amped up. So. A good game maximizes these two concepts of fear and flow to really hook the user, right? That's what gets them going. It triggers all kinds of chemical things in their brain, the prefrontal cortex, all things, everything lights up and they just get amped up and they literally, it's like a drug, right? Like when you're in a good game and fear and flow are maximized, you can't stop. Right? This, again, I'm joking about it. People die in South Korea playing games in internet cafes because they get so hooked because the games are built to maximize fear and flow, and they stop eating, they stop drinking, and they die at their keyboard. Wow, that's a hell of a game. So, that in the most flattering way possible. Also, that's a fear. I call it the 1988 fear. Not that one, mine's more rude. Anyway, so what's in the game? So there's four things that make a game. The first is a goal. What are you trying to accomplish? Rules that bound the game. The feedback system lets you know how you're doing. But most importantly, voluntary participation, right? Raking leaves in the yard satisfies the first three, right? Here, son. Here's a rake. Your goal? Stack all the leaves into a pile. What's your feedback system? Are all the leaves in a pile yet? No? Continue. It's a very simple flow diagram. One of the rules, you can't set shit on fire, and don't marry your brother if he doesn't want it. Okay, good. I understand. Those are the rules. Is it fun? No. Does he want to do it? No. Is there a carrot? Nope. There's a big-ass stick. And when you jump, you land in it, and the stick goes in your eye, you go to the ER. So, every year that happens somewhere, some kid goes face first in a pile of leaves and gets a stick in the eye and goes to the ER. As a parent, I freak out. Can I jump in the leaves? No! They're very dangerous leaves. Absolutely. Under no circumstances. What about this big pile of feathers? No! There might be a goose in there. I'm so risk-averse, it's stupid. So the voluntary participation is really what makes a game. And so if you don't have that, you don't have a game, you just have a job. And sometimes jobs are satisfying, but they're not a game by definition. So I want to talk about a few games that we play here in the community and talk about how they help you from a voluntary participation perspective, what they accomplish that you might not be able to accomplish otherwise, and frankly, how we can make them better. Does anybody recognize this CTF? Anybody know which CTF in particular? DerbyCon, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I guess. It's grown up a bit. It's this isn't actually the CTF room, but that's basically what it looked like. It's crazy. It's a party. It's a good time. It's DerbyCon CTF. That may be a T-shirt. So what is CTF? A lot of people play them. For those that haven't, it's at least defense. Some CTFs are only really defending. They're not like CTFs, but then they are. But it's an attack and defense game where you have to maintain services. You're going to get other people's boxes, steal their keys, overwrite their keys, whatever it is. It's interesting because security, this industry, has a hell of a time with metrics, right? Like, we want metrics. As human beings, we want metrics. We want to put a box around things, know how good a job they're doing with numbers, discrete mathematics. It's really hard to put metrics on things in our industry. There's DerbyCon. It's a conference based on, it's all about security metrics. How long's DerbyCon been going on? I thought maybe you would know. It's good we hang out with the old school people. Shit, you're coming with that later, aren't you? Yeah. I think I just called her old. I'm gonna step back for a minute. So, I mean, MetroCons are going on for a while. You can read about the state of the art. It's hard to put metrics on security. It's freaking hard. But CTFs do a damn good job. You go to DEFCON CTF page, like, here's how we score it. Spell it all out in integers, man. No floating point. Don't confuse people with floating point. Keep it in integers. God help you get a fraction of a point, people will fight. Just move the decimal farther to the right, it'll be fine. So, you know, they base that on how long you had a key, how many services were up, and can always score it automatically. They've done a fantastic job of providing a scoreboard. So that's kind of a conventional feedback mechanism, right? You look up, are we winning or not? Yes, no. Are we making progress? Yes, no. And frankly, in CTF, a lot of times the scoreboard is a challenge in and of itself, because they may not be transparent with the scoring tab. Like, we just took this key and we submitted it, and our score went down. What happened? Like, oh, we stole the wrong key, somebody else had planted, we didn't realize it, you know, whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of scenarios. So, there are so many discrete moments of victory within the CTF, assuming you're doing it right. I mean, there are times I've seen teams in CTFs who are just a mile underwater. They have no idea what's going on. There's no fear, there's no flow. There's just, I'm going to sit here and not act embarrassed for another day and then go home. You know? Most of the time, you know, you crack some service, you find some vulnerability, you write the exploit perfectly, you get through. Man, is it satisfying, right? That builds that voluntary participation. Voluntary participation in CTF is interesting because in the early days, like in the DEFCON CTF, it was chaos, right? So that DEFCON, I guess, so DEFCON 4, I think, was the first CTF there, and for the first few years, it was kind of a bring a box and let people break into it, and you can break it up people's boxes. It was a free-for-all. So DEFCON 5, I think it was DEFCON 5, Theo Doran is there. Remember that Theo? Obviously, he's a colorful character. Theo's there, and he brought it up with BSD box. It's got some services running, and there's a couple of really drunk Eastern European, I want to say German guys there, and they're hacking away in this open BSD box. And at some point, they pop a root shell on the BSD box. And Theo comes over and is like, how the hell did you do that? And they're like, what do you mean? How'd you get rid of the box? Starts speaking to each other in German, and they're pretty damn drunk. And they look at Theo and he's telling the God's honest truth, we are so drunk, we have no idea. Theo was furious. What do you mean, my baby? You can't tell me why. So what's interesting is in those early days, there were those intense moments of fear where there was a sense of accomplishment, right? Because you bring an internet-hardened OS with not a lot of services running and tell people to break into it, that's not really interesting, right? That's like breaking concrete with a chisel. Like, maybe eventually you can figure it out, but it's going to take a long time, and you're going to be frustrated before you make progress. So when I think really when Ghetto Hackers took it over and really amped it up and turned it into a game, it had a formal scoreboard and put rules around it. Right? Rules that constrain people so that when they got past an objective, it was a real step forward and got them that fear. Then, man, people got hooked, and then now it's like it is today. There's qualifiers around the world. Hundreds of teams try to make it there, and only 8 make it. It's like the X Factor, but for geeks. Compared CTF to the X Factor, someone's going to punch me in the balls for that later. So what do they learn? You know, there's a lot of stuff you learn in CTF. Whatever applications you get, that's what you deal with. And it's interesting because you learn lots of advanced reverse engineering techniques and how to write exploits for things that you've never seen before, et cetera, et cetera. Stuff that you very hard to teach in the classroom. Especially in a day and a half or 2 days or however long they have. I mean, people really get a lot from this experience. Talk to people that have participated, at least had a moderately successful time. They get a lot out of this, more than any $2,000 week-long training thing they possibly could have sent them to, right?
What can be improved? I don't know. There's so many different types of CTF anymore. There's a panel that you taught last year you can go watch. There's lots of ways that it can be done differently, but in general, it's hack or crack, right? I mean, when the line's that deep to play, you know you got something good. So while there may be room for improvement, I don't know that there's a lot of them. Anybody recognize this? Attack Fortress. So this is, I'll explain it for those that have never played or seen it. So Hack Fortress, we do DerbyCon, and we take on the road DerbyCon each year. The idea is, so TF2, it's red versus blue multiplayer first-person game. Usually 30-minute rounds. People blow each other up until you capture all the control points or whatever the objective is. We combine that with a hacking contest. So there's discrete challenges that the hackers have to participate in. So there's red hackers and blue hackers. And depending on the challenges, there's point difficulties associated with them. When they finish hack challenges, not only do they finish it, but then they can take the points and redeem them to go do things in the TF2 world, like set the other team on fire, or make their team invincible, or things like that. So there's a tie-in, a little thing that hooks into the source engine that in real time it can manipulate the game environment for the TF2 game. So the hackers get to have some control over the TF2 environment. And so not only do they get the sense of accomplishment for the hack, and then they get to go set somebody on fire. Like, it's really, and they do it again and again and again because I'm stocking a lot of points, and the team literally just runs around on fire. And so you see them on the screen, because their little character does this too. And then when he shoots, gets real serious for like a split second and shoots, boom, that's really cool. We made this for World War II. It's shiny, it does stuff. And really, the scoreboard kind of helps understand the aggregate of how the two environments work, because I think individually you can understand how to play TF2 and how to hack. That's really the aggregation score that becomes interesting. Voluntary participation. It's interesting. Once people play this, they tend to get hooked, because they like the format. It's quick, it's 30-minute rounds, you can go on the rest of your day, you bring whatever tools you have, you sit down and hack for 30 minutes, and you leave. The challenge is describing the game. Like you can describe a CTF, when I describe a 30-minute hacking TF2 thing in a way, by the time you get 3 sentences in, like half the people are like, I don't give a shit, I'm not going to play. So the first couple of years we ran it, I think the uptake was a little low, but then we kind of refined some of the scoring, we managed to convince people what this thing was, and then they really got into it. Obviously, again, hacking under pressure, these little tiny challenges, prioritizing them, that kind of thing is, again, hard to learn unless you're in an environment that facilitates it. How do you improve it? The TF2 players will get a lot of feedback on what's going on the hack side. If you ever play TF2, the left-hand side of your screen just scrolling with people chatting and stuff, and every once in a while say, like, the hackers did X, and it scrolls off the top, and you never see it again. So there's not a lot of feedback there. So I think the hackers see the feedback system much more so than the TF2 players, but for anyone who's playing TF2, it's not an issue, because what do? You just keep blowing people up. Like, that's what's so enjoyable. Like, go play Pyro, set everyone on fire, and smile. Like, it's just like, oh, this is what I've been missing my whole life, So there's already a lot of feedback in TF2, we need to make that a priority. Everybody recognize this? Ring of Warrior, Black Bag Contest, whatever, a lot of different things that DB and that whole crew have done over the years. This is some dude locked in a cage. He's got to get the handcuffs off his back and then pick his way out and then beat up the guard. The androgynous lipstick wearing, who knows, and then whatever. So this is something again where the feedback for physical games is immediate, right? It's like a hack. You get in. Sometimes you get in, you don't quite know that you got in or whatever. When you open a lock, you know what? It's binary, right? You can pick that you get in. And so there's this huge sense of accomplishment. It's instantaneous. Click, I got out. Click, I opened these handcuffs, did this thing, People love these physical challenges because that feedback is so instantaneous. And they've done a great job of balancing the difficulty. So you have different degrees of difficulty that give you different amounts of points. If you're new, you can still finish the course. Because I assure you, anyone in this room can open a wafer lock with a set of lock picks in 35 seconds, right? We can teach you right now. You can walk outside, take some crappy beat up wafer lock, go click, 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 boom, and be like, I can pick locks, I am a god. It's cool. So again, voluntary participation. Go to DerbyCon and watch the contest there. It's just unboxing. People trying to play, people trying to watch. the sense of fear again is just intense because it's so, man, I got this lock, man, I got this lock. And there's people cheering, I mean, it's just outstanding. So what did they learn? One, from a tradecraft perspective, when you practice physical security, like when you really go out and do this, you're typically doing it in a high-stress environment, right? You're breaking into a building, right? You're breaking into, whatever the hell it is. And it can be stressful. I mean, it's late at night, security guards are walking around. How do you get that practice? Well, stand in front of 500 people at DerbyCon, handcuffed and blindfolded. It comes close, right? Like it's pretty serious. And improvisation, like one year I played, and I guess it took out my little comment. I popped a handcuff key in my mouth and walked around with it for half an hour. Just so no one would see that it was in my mouth when I walked up to play. And so when I started, I didn't have to shift the handcuffs. I spit out the key. I was like, dude, I've been talking to you for 15 minutes. I'm like, yeah, it's been in there a while. Like, it tastes like shit. Like, I'm sure this radioactive chrome that they use is bad news. So Deviant and crew made other immersive games, and I think their only problem becomes logistics. They get more complex. You've got different blocks and things you have to measure time, and there's failure. It's a physical system, and things fail, and I think that's one of their biggest challenges. We're getting toward the end here, and I'm running out of time, so yeah. So this is one. This was not an open source thing out of the con, but my company, we ended up doing basically a hotel takeover. And it was originally people who showed up thought they were coming for like normal IT security training. They sit there, listen to speakers, and watch the demos and that kind of thing for a day and a half, 2 days, something like that. And they show up, and halfway through the first day, suddenly the hotel gets hacked. Right? So like the guy gets up to give a keynote presentation, gets up, and he opens up his laptop, and there's a message from some adversarial group that says, hey, we own you, we own the hotel, you're going to notice that people aren't there anymore, they've been working with us, we've locked rooms, we're inside the corporate network now, thanks very much, you guys are all stuck off-site, ha 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 ha, shit like that. And people thought like, oh my God, we really know. And the idea was to create an immersive environment where they had to go through and regain control of the hotel, break into rooms, get control of the camera systems in the hotel again. They had to go do recon on the adversary, break into their systems, hack back, and that kind of thing. But it was all meant as this kind of exploration, like we didn't argue with any tools, here are the people here, we'll try to help you out and figure this out. The challenge, of course, is any organization who's having an offsite thinks they're really going to be attacked is like going to go home, right? So at some point you have to be like, this is just a training exercise, haha, just kidding. And so what was interesting is what happened in that moment when it went from, oh my God, we've been hacked, this is a real thing, to, oh, this is just training. Some people just checked out. And the challenges, again, like each challenge had, there were lots of discrete little subcomponents and people got a lot out of, solving them and whatever. But I think that subterfuge, when we went from, see how fast I can go backwards here. Oops, I made a mistake in judgment. When we went from doing the real thing at the bottom of the Dale's pyramid to where they're totally immersed and they're going to learn because this is what's actually happening. And then they bumped up and go, oh, it's just a hands-on workshop with a lot of lead in it. Some people shot right to the end and like, I'm going to learn 10% today, which was interesting. I don't think we expected that to happen. So, we made a game and tried to make it as far down the pyramid, as far down that cone as possible. And I think we screwed up because we went so far down that we broke it when they came back up. So it was kind of that, what's the divide with the human-looking people in games there?
Uncanny Valley.
Uncanny Valley. Not a divide, it's a valley, dumbass. Kind of took people over the uncanny valley of gaming and security training, and oops, that's not a real game, and they gave up. So, it was a very interesting learning experience for a variety of reasons. So, I guess what I want to kind of leave you with today is there are a lot of different ways that you can turn your training into a game. And every training situation is different. The people you're trying to train are different. That kind of thing. People who aren't likely to be engaged need to be engaged somehow if you want to educate them. Okay? If not, turn it into a compliance exercise and be done. Right? If you don't want to educate them and you just want to hold them accountable, that's going to be something completely different, right? Make them sign a piece of paper, say, I will try not to be a dumbass, and if I am, I will run my access, period. Problem solved. Big stick, walk away from the problem. if you really want to try to make a difference, you're going to be trying to engage with people who probably don't give a shit, right? And the way to engage in this game, there's lots of examples out there of things that do and don't work, scavenger hunts and things like that. They're very low-hanging fruit and don't take that much more effort than right now they students sending emails that people can read. This works for all levels. And so one of the things that's interesting is you have to have, when you develop a game, you gotta have clear goals, you gotta have clear rules, and you gotta have clear feedback. And when I say you, I mean the person who's building it. The people playing the game don't have to know the rules and the goals up ahead, right? I mean, think about the first time you played Half-Life 2. What am I doing? I'm on a tram. Or Half-Life, I guess the original Half-Life. Like coming in on a tram, you're looking around like, the graphics are gorgeous and I need to buy a better video card. Holy shit. I can run this at 800 by 600 with a better card. Yeah, y'all heard that, right? The first time you played Half-Life. This one guy said, I have a better card to start with, thank you very much. You didn't know what the hell was going on, and how satisfying was that game? Like, you can still go back and play some of those early games, and it's amazingly rewarding, even when you know now how to play, because it still just unfolds in front of you. And you can do security training like that. I guess the examples I showed you, that last one was really to emphasize, don't get carried away. Like, don't fancy yourself a real game designer. Don't try to get too far down and get Dale's cone, or you're likely to get in trouble where you're going to alienate people that you're trying to educate. So, anyway, that's all I really have today. I probably have 30 seconds for any questions, but any questions? Be shy. Sure, I have a question. Would I open source my hotel game? Probably not. Most of it was just VM building, right? And there was a lot of freaking hardware. Like, as it turns out, the hotel didn't have a camera set up before we got there. So we had to install cameras, you know? So most of that game was just straight up labor. It wasn't actually I mean, we used off-the-shelf, all the usual security off-the-shelf stuff. But I mean, I've been talking about that in more detail before.
And people were working to be lost. And realized it was set up like a real bomb. So if they had burgers, as soon as that one guy was still thinking to be lost, he picked up the case of the time, it's like really quick, he goes, oh my God, it's a bomb!
Really? Like it freaks him out?
All the feedback that came.
That's awesome.
And it messed everybody up in the room.
Right. So that pushed them down. Okay, that's awesome. That's super cool. All right, we'll take one more in the back. Absolutely. Mystery box is that I didn't get a slight loss. I'll probably hear about that later. So another great contest. Lost puts in a lot of time. And again, it's contained. Get a lot of feedback from that. It's very rewarding. It unravels itself in front of you. It's it's an amazing process. So anyway, somebody else has got to come up and talk. If you have any questions, I'll be out later.